All right, we are off and running here on OverDrive. It is not the sweet tones of Hazy B, my partsy, whom was correct about last night's game, I might add. Al's brother, filling in for the day alongside Dave Feschuk. Mail It In Friday, brought to you by Boston Pizza. Boston Pizza's new game day menu. Stop by your local BP for $7 touchdown pine shareables for the whole crew and weekly prizing up for grabs. Football game days are better at your local BP. What's happening, Dave?
We got no Hayes, but I'm happy to be with the bro himself. You guys are hot.
We are pretty hot, I will say. Like we've won a lot of games in a row here. Like a good stretch of games. We've won 3 straight so far. And I think we were like 7-20 at one point. And since then, we've rattled off, I want to say like 9, like, what are we now? 23, 17, and 1. I think we were 13 and 14, 13 and 12 at some point. I don't know. Wow. We were terrible. And we came and clawed ourselves back. And we picked the winner last night with the Rams. It was an ugly, ugly football game. But we got the win nonetheless.
Yeah. I mean, how about a touchdown? Mixing a touchdown,
Would have been nice. Would have been nice. First game of the season without a touchdown in this NFL year. And, I mean, look, you look at a game like last night, it's so hard to play in elements like that. Like, it was an absolute monsoon. And you could see, like, the way that those quarterbacks were trying to throw the football, everything was sailing, leaving their hands. And I'm surprised that there weren't more turnovers in a game like that that's so wet and so gross. Like, we didn't get a pick until the fourth quarter when the game was basically decided with that pick in the end zone. There was a few that were dropped, but again, wet ball, they weren't able to hang on to it. Yeah. But it wasn't a clean game. It was not a clean game. It was an ugly one, but 12-6, very low scoring, and it was just a field goal fest. But anytime that Hayes and Bro can pick a winner, I'll consider it a good game.
Yeah, I'm happy for you guys. I was worried about you. I mean, I've sat in this very seat a few times this season where Hayes has kind of taken his shots at you, basically threw you under the bus, blamed you for the team's problems, and the team had problems.
Yeah, there was issues. There was issues. Like we battled back. We were down by 8, 9 games at one point. And now we're +3. Yeah, we're feeling good. Well, another big slate of games coming up this weekend too. So Luke's gonna join us at 6:00. No Hayes though, so it's mano-y-mano. No Hayes, no O. It's just Bro versus Pro today, and that's going to be up at 6:00.
That'll be good. That'll be good. Now, is there no Hayes lurking in the background? Is he not micromanaging you over text?
We are in conversation. He shot me a text about 30 minutes ago asking for my lean. So at some point, we're going to be mixing it up. We'll go back and forth, and we make our picks in unison. We are a team, unlike those losers on the other side who very clearly it's a one-sided group over there. They share one brain, I would say. If you know what I'm saying.
I don't know what you're saying.
No? All right. One man makes the decisions over there. It's very Bill Belichickian over there, if you're catching my drift.
Chapel Bill?
Little Chapel Bill.
Owen Wilson territory?
That's basically what it is.
Right.
What it is. And not the Brady Belichick era, the Belichick Mac Jones era.
Gotcha.
That's what's going on over there.
Okay. Well, you guys turned your season around, but the team that I thought was going to turn its season around, I was waiting for it to turn its season around.
The Niners?
The Niners? How bad? Like, if you would have sat here, at day one of the NFL season, when they were among the favorites, if not the favorite, to win the Super Bowl, and certainly the NFC, I mean, what were the odds you would have been saying, these guys are 6-8. They just lost to the Rams and couldn't score a touchdown. I mean, this has been a massive, massive plummet.
It has been.
Expectations.
It has been. And look, it's been a tough year for them right from the get-go, right? Like, you had Trent Williams, who held out all summer. And then you also, Christian McCaffrey injury obviously plays a big role. Brandon Ayuk held out and then came back. He got hurt. Debo has dealt with injuries. Nick Bosa's always been banged up. Dre Greenlaw, obviously, he returned to action last night. Only played one half pretty much, and then there was another situation with a linebacker we'll get to in a second. But there's just been a lot of distractions. And right from the start of training camp, from right away with the holdouts, the contract situations with Brandon Ayuk, the injury to Christian McCaffrey, just so much has gone wrong for that team, and they just weren't really ever able to get their feet underneath them. And then last night, I think, was maybe the biggest dagger of all. First of all, they lost the game, and now they pretty much put themselves out of it this year. And I think now at this point, they had to win. It was must-win territory. And they not only lost, couldn't even muster up a touchdown, and they had a guy quit on them at halftime.
Wow.
Deommodore Campbell apparently said he did not want to play for the team. He just didn't want to play in the second half. Didn't want to play football. I've never, it was absolutely, it was Antonio Brown a couple years ago kind of had a similar situation.
Kind of danced off the field, threw his gloves in the stands, took his shirt off.
Vontae Davis, that 1 year with the Bills, they were getting wrecked, and he's like, "All right, I'm out."
Retired mid-game.
Mid-game, I'm done. He was in the locker room, and he was on the freeway, literally by the start of the third quarter, basically.
Yeah.
And Deommodore Campbell basically did the same thing. I believe he's been cut officially. He was cut last night, and look, that's just awful to do to your team. That's the thing that stinks. I feel for the team and for the guys who are going out there and putting their bodies on the line, and in a must-win game like that, to quit on them at halftime, it's just super selfish. And, you could really feel from the players. And there's a couple of guys yesterday, George Kittle, Travarius Ward, they were definitely quite upset with Deommodore Campbell. Here's what they had to say post-game.
That is one person who just decided not to, play for his teammates, and I don't think that doesn't make our offense look at each other and be like, wow, man, we're falling apart. It's more of or like the defense, hey, we're falling apart. It's more of a one person making like Mooney said, a selfish decision, and I'm with Mooney on that. And I've never been around anybody that's ever done that, and I hope I'm never around anybody that does that again.
I mean, he's a professional. He's been playing for a long time. I mean, if he didn't want to play, he shouldn't have dressed out. He could have told him that before the game. So I feel like there was some sucker that he did. Definitely hurt the team because, D went down, and we needed a linebacker, and I think Flynn was named up too. So for him to do that, that's some sucker stuff to me, in my opinion. It's probably going to get cut soon, so, it is what it is with that.
Yeah, and there's no coming back from that. I mean, once your teammates are suing you, the coach came out afterwards, and he was obviously he tried his best to hide the frustration and basically tried to act like it was a nothing burger. He was he very clearly was going to move on from Deommodore Campbell, but the teammates really came out and sued him and said exactly what they should have said. He quit on the team, and I thought Travarius Ward coming out and saying he's going to be cut soon. Doesn't matter. Yeah. That's exactly what ended up happening today, given his walking papers, as he should have. And I'm not sure another team is going to be willing to give him a chance in the NFL.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's bizarre to me that in none of the reporting I've seen has he been quoted or has his agent been quoted. And they better step up to the mic pretty quickly and explain this, because you're right.
What can you say?
Well,
what can you say?
You better have a reason. You better have a reason. You better have, I had a mental health episode, or I just, I had this or I had that. You better have a reason, because to your point, if you don't have a reason and it's just, well, they started another guy in front of me and I was starting most of the year and I lost my job and I wasn't happy and I didn't want to go back in just to spite him. If that's the reason, and we all think it is, until we hear otherwise, if that's the reason, you're right. What are the odds that any other team's going to take a chance with this guy?
I just don't think that he'll be accepted into another locker room. And like I said, Luke's going to join us at about 6 o'clock, and he's someone who played in the NFL. He's played for a few teams, many locker rooms, and I texted him last night. I'm like, we're going to have to talk about this, because as a former player, how hard would it be if your team signed Deommodore? And he's not a terrible player. This is a guy who made a Pro Bowl a couple of years ago when he was playing for the Packers. He's a good player. He was, and now he's a little bit older and whatnot. And he was upset that Dre Greenlaw came back, snaps got limited, whatever. But you can't quit on your team like that. It's kind of weird, too. Outrageous.
I'm with you. It was kind of weird because the Dre Greenlaw story was kind of like a story of triumph, right?
It was supposed to be.
He hadn't played since the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He'd had that Achilles problem. He was coming back for the first time. And it was, if you're any kind of teammate, aren't you
galvanize around that?
Aren't you happy for the guy? He made it back from a very difficult injury, and here he is taking the field. And the bottom line was, you were going to get opportunity because Dre Greenlaw wasn't going to be able to play every snap. So it was very clear that, he was going to be needed in this scenario.
Yeah, 100%.
And then for whatever reason, and I would love to hear it, he just decided, you know what? I'd rather not.
Well, here's what really I think makes that team, the 49ers and the people in that locker room and the people in that organization even more upset. Because again, it was a must-win football game. And there's only limited roster spots that you're available to have. So it's not like you can, there's no e-bug situation where you can grab a guy off the stands to play linebacker for you.
Imagine that.
It would be outstanding. I'll sign up for that any day. Let's let Michael Pinball know that I'm willing to be an e-bug fullback for the Argonauts next season. Maybe a little nose tackle or something. But that's not a thing in the NFL, obviously. Almost had an e-bug situation last night with the Maple Leafs. Get to that in a second. But here's something that really kind of, I don't want to say broke my heart, but Emmanuel Acho tweeted this out yesterday. Fred Warner's playing with a broken ankle. Ricky Pearsall got shot and came back to play this season. Charvarius Ward lost a child and went on to play in that football game. Those guys are doing what's best for the team because they have respect for his former teammates and everyone in that building, that locker room, etc. And Deommodore Campbell, what Emmanuel Ocho says, quit because of a bruised ego.
Good line.
A great line from Ocho. And it really made me think like, wow, everyone else is paying the price to play football, to put that Niners jersey on, to go out and play for the Bang Bang Niner gang and fight for a playoff spot, which is exactly what they were doing last night. Divisional game, primetime, Thursday night. And this guy couldn't get out there, didn't want to play. That was the reasoning he gave the coach. Didn't want to play.
I mean,
unspeakable.
Look, I completely agree with everything you just said there.
Take a Steve Kerr word, unconscionable.
Unconscionable.
Yeah.
And that was an unconscionable call.
Great line also.
I will say that. Steve Kerr was right about that game. The refs botched that game the other night in the NBA Cup. The Warriors lost their chance at the NBA Cup thanks to some shoddy refereeing, including a missed foul call on Steph Curry. But you know what? And I agree with all that stuff about those guys were playing for the team. But also, like, the thing about the NFL is it's also the classic every man for himself league where you don't really have an option but to play for your team because you're playing for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you can be cut at any moment. And very few guys have the luxury of substantial guarantees in their contract. And you know what? Deommodore Campbell is proving that this morning because he's been cut for this kind of insubordination. And again, I would love to hear the reason. Like, there was an NHL goaltender, Al Smith, back in the 70s, AB, guy born in Toronto, played for the Sabres. Like, he retired after he was pulled from a game. He was supposed to be the starter. And the story went that, no, the GM called down to the coach and said, no, put in the rookie, Don Edwards. Al Smith's not playing tonight, even though they told Al Smith he'd be playing. He did a twirl, waved goodbye, apparently waved to the owner, the late Seymour Knox, and said, I'm out of here. I'm done with hockey. This was Al Smith, okay? And, that was it. But you could, and people sort of took Al Smith's side to some degree on that team. I remember people saying that people were sympathetic to Al Smith because he was a hard worker. He was a good teammate. Everybody loved him. And he just decided, you know what? I've had enough of this. I've had enough of being jerked around, for lack of a better term. So you can there are stories where guys have done something that looks kind of selfish, but you can sort of understand.
Well, Patrick Waugh is a good example, too, when he skated off and said, trade me. And that was it. That was the end of Patrick Waugh and the Montreal Canadiens.
That's right.
Right? Like that was the end of that. And
so it's happened, but I mean, I just want to hear what Deommodore Campbell has to say about this because it's as simple as I'm just a selfish jerk and I don't care what anybody says. My ego is bruised and I didn't want to go in the game. I mean, he better come up with a better story than that.
100%. 100%. And even if he does, I'm still not sure that he's going to get another opportunity in the NFL. But the Rams with the win last night, and they now hold their own fate when it comes to the playoffs. And it's a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. They got the Jets next week, Cardinals, and then Week 18 against the Seahawks. They win out those 3 games. They're in the playoffs. They win the NFC West. So, the Rams, they wanted that win last night a heck of a lot more than Deommodore Campbell, and they got it.
If you're the agent, don't you have to go up to him and say, Deommodore, you got to tell him you didn't say I didn't want to play. You got to say I couldn't play.
Yes,
like I pulled my groin.
Well, it's kind of similar to the Anthony Richardson situation a couple of weeks ago, where in his mind, he was injured. He didn't want to play. He felt like he was injured and couldn't play in that next snap, and he tapped himself out, which was bad enough as is, and it cost him a game. He ended up getting benched the next game for Joe Flacco. Things are all good now, apparently, in Indianapolis, but like we've seen it before. But again, I remember saying at the time, you can't just come out and say, oh, I was tired. You cannot use that as an
That was
excuse.
pretty disgraceful.
You can't do that. And just like Devon, come up with say, I tweaked something.
That's all you gotta
lie.
say.
Like, honestly, lie.
That's all you have to say.
Exactly.
Like if Anthony Richardson would have said, you know what? Yeah, I tweaked my calf. I just had to get the trainers to look at it, and I couldn't come back in until they looked at it, or they massaged a knot out of my hammy, or I had a Charlie horse and I needed to give it a rub, or some A535. You could have said anything other than, I'm a little out of shape essentially, and I really couldn't keep up with the pace of the NFL.
Well, yeah, and I guess this is a decent little transition into what we saw happen in the Maple Leafs game last night, because Anthony Stolarz exited the game after the first period. I don't believe he said, I'm not feeling it. Go ahead, take the rest of the game, Joe Wall. A legitimate injury to Anthony Stolarz last night. Maple Leafs with a 3-2 win over the Anaheim Ducks. Sounds as though it's not as bad as it looked last night. I believe we have Craig Berube talking about the injury. Why don't we listen to Craig now?
Well, I thought we got good news on him. Day-to-day right now. He obviously didn't go on the ice today, but we'll see tomorrow if he can get out there.
Do you expect him back next week? Sorry.
What's that?
Do you expect him back next week?
Stolarz?
Yeah.
I do, but in saying that, like, again, he's got to get on the ice, and but it was good news overall. So let's just leave it at that. Right now it's day to day.
See, the problem with day-to-day in Leafland is that day-to-day has turned into an IR stint almost every single time.
Day-to-day is fire up the private jet from Munich, right? We got to go see that. We got to go see that cuckoo doctor that hands out the goat's blood, because that's what, of course, Austin Matthews did. Max Pacioretty saw that guy for his Achilles injury. Christian McCaffrey saw that guy.
Yeah,
a lot of maybe. Speaking of Christian McCaffrey, let's hope the Leafs can only hope that teams with guys that went to Munich in the recent past do not have all experience the same fate as the 49ers last night, with Christian McCaffrey watching from the press box as his team's season's chances went kaput. But yeah, you're right. We don't know what day-to-day means anymore in Leafland. We don't know what it means for Anthony Stolarz. But the idea that it was good news, I would take that to mean, nothing major, nothing torn, nothing that's going to require surgery.
A pull, if anything.
Yeah.
Sound like that, at least.
Yeah.
We hope.
He's not like, you're right. We don't have any transparency in the NHL when it comes to injuries, so we're only speculating. But, until he's on the ice and until he's going post to post and doing all the stuff goalies do that puts stress on all those muscles that tend to pull and tend to tear, we won't really know much.
What do you make of the discourse today about Stolarz, and maybe he shouldn't have been playing that game? Because the Leafs have done a pretty good job with this tandem, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And this was the first time in a couple of weeks that we've seen a goalie get a consecutive start. Played really well in New Jersey, earned another start, and they gave it to him. And then he ends up injuring himself. Now, you can... whether or not it was because of an accumulated workload or it was just a freak injury, we don't know. But it does seem like that conversation is popping up today. Like, why play Stolarz in that game and go away from what's been working with your tandem?
Yeah, look, given what we know about goaltending injuries in this league, it makes a lot of sense to play them back and forth, just to keep the tandem going all year. But I'll tell you one thing. The one thing I've found out about, NHL management, NHL coaches, maybe it's because most of them are from a different generation where number one was number one, and if you didn't have a number one, you didn't have a goaltender.
Right.
But no matter how many goalies they've got on their roster, no matter how many times people tell them that this is a league where you need not one, not two, you probably need three goalies in this league nowadays. Right now, I think it is AB. Last year, 98 guys played in the league, which is more than three per team, right, on average. This year, I think it's 84 have played so far, which is like 2.6 per team, getting up to three.
Yeah.
The Leafs have needed three so far. Hildeby's already been in there for some spot starts. So you need two, probably three goalies now, but they still want that number one. And they still want to give a guy room to run if he's playing really well. And so I think that's why they gave Stolarz another start, because he was so good against New Jersey.
Yeah.
They wanted to reward him, and I think there's something to that psychologically.
I agree. Look, I didn't have an issue with them starting Stolarz last night. Like, I'm of, I guess, I don't know if it's the majority, the minority right now. I just know that conversation was out there. But if you are going to be a starting goaltender in the NHL, like, you have to play in consecutive games. And if you're going to be the playoff guy come game one and you play well, you're going to be expected to play in game two.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I don't understand why people believe, you shouldn't have played in that game. Yeah, you should have. Because if the team believes that he might turn into the number one or at least the clear-cut 1A and get a bulk of the start, 4 of every 6 games perhaps, there's going to be a couple of back-to-backs. I don't mean back-to-back as in, play Friday, then play Saturday, but consecutive games.
Yeah.
Why can't you play Tuesday and then again on Thursday? Most good goaltenders are able to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you, except that Anthony Stolarz has no track record of doing it, right? This is a guy whose career high is 24, 25 games.
But I don't necessarily think that was because he wasn't healthy enough to do that. I think just he's always been a backup.
Yeah, but the thing is, I agree. That is true. You're playing behind Sergei Bobrovsky
right.
and winning a Stanley Cup. Yeah, you're not getting sustained starts. It just doesn't happen. It didn't happen for him. But the bottom line is, like, his body's not used to it, right? His body's never been through the gauntlet of playing 40, 50 games like a lot of NHL starters do, a lot of NHL number ones do. This is a guy who's played half that. And now he's on pace to play far more than his career high. And we're going to see how his body reacts to that. But so far, I guess, talking about it at this particular moment, and we don't know. It might be a tweak that's absolutely meaningless. He's back on the ice in a couple days, and we don't even remember this in a week. But if it's something more than that, it's concerning. And even if it's not something more than that, this is kind of a reminder of the toll this position takes on guys. Like, up and down in the butterfly, man, it's not a natural movement, and it kills your hips. It stresses your knees and on down that chain. And that's why teams need multiple guys.
The only thing I'll say about that, and since in the last calendar month, what's today, the 13th? So in the last calendar month, I believe he's only played 6 games.
Yeah.
Like, he's only played 6 games. It's been a very light schedule.
Yeah.
So it's not as though he's been worked. Like, 6 games in a calendar month should not give you that much stress on your body.
No.
And if you can't play 6 games in a 30-day span, basically, that is a concern.
That is a concern. I agree with you.
So I think that's why I look at that and I think to myself, I don't like the argument about the workload because it really has not been there.
No, I totally understand. I'm just saying, like, to me, there's a certain rhythm to just going back and forth with these two guys. To me, neither one has really distinguished himself as the superior guy yet. And as much as, Stolarz definitely had the best game of the season, the other night, and, his expected goals saved above average was crazy. I think he saved like 3 point something,
369
more than average.
Yeah.
Which means if you had an average goalie in the net, you would have lost 4 or 5-1.
Yeah.
And if a below average goalie was in there, you would have lost 6 or 7-1. So that was an amazing game, and you had to give him a lot of credit. But look, I think this is the worst fears of Leaf fans sort of just flashing before them, because we saw what happened on the eve of Game 7 last year with Joseph Woll, where just when it looked like he was heating up and he was going to be the guy that delivered another series victory, he couldn't go. Just when you thought Anthony Stolarz was emerging as a Vezina candidate, he can't go. Let's hope it's just a blip and he's back out there quickly, because you'd hate to see a guy having this good a season have it interrupted by something like this.
And Berube, it sounds like he's positive. He did come out and say, for the most part, sounded like a positive situation. Should be back next week. He was kind of dancing around it, that it didn't seem like a serious issue. But again, we just don't know. They said the same thing about Jake McCabe. Said the same thing about David Campbell. Like, just been a lot of injuries that just have randomly turned into IR and LTIR stints this season.
And I appreciate Berube, because there was one kind of very sort of frank comment there, which was he's got to get back on the ice.
Yeah.
In other words, he's just like us. The coach will believe it when he sees it.
Right.
You can talk to the sports science guys, you can talk to the trainers and talk to the doctors and see the x-rays and see the MRIs, but until the guy's out there, what does it matter?
Darren Dreger will stop by in about 5 minutes. We'll see if he has any more insight for us on the injury. And Johnny going to join us today as well at 5 o'clock. So we'll get his thoughts on last night's game and a bunch of other big storylines around the NHL. Javon Shepherd, there was a Raptors game last night. Looked good for a little bit, and then things fell apart. So Javon Shepherd will help us with that. Luke Wilson also at 6 o'clock. We got our football picks to make. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Feschuk. You're listening to OverDrive here on TSN 1050 and up on TSN 4. OverDrive continues on the TSN 1050 and up on TSN 4. Mike DiStefano filling in for Brian Hayes. No O-Dog, no Noodles as well. We got my man Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star in with us. And, we're reacting to a Maple Leafs victory last night, but they did lose a starting goaltender in the process. And to join us to chat about it and give us an update is Darren Dreger, TSN Hockey Insider. What's going on, Dregs?
Hey, guys. How are you? A little crispy out there this morning. Just a nice Canadian sort of day here as we get ready for Christmas. So no complaints on my end.
You starting to flood the rinks yet or what?
No, but I am getting the odd Instagram picture and X picture sent my way. And I'm bracing myself. As we know, annually I do the Christmas Eve marathon of backyard rinks and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there are less and less people doing it, maybe less and less people who follow me. So I'm a little worried. This year might be a bit lean.
I'm sure everyone's going to, now that they know that it's a reminder. We just gave them a reminder to tag Dregs, and he'll go on his Twitter tirade on Christmas Eve. So last night, the Maple Leafs, they get the win. They bounced back, played well last night, beat the Ducks 3-2. But the story coming out of the game, obviously, was the injury to Anthony Stolarz. Berube came out and said day to day. Do you have any more insight into the situation for us, Dregs?
Well, no, I think he was pretty clear without being specific. I mean, in that is good news, right? Day to day, as long as it doesn't linger in the way that perhaps other injuries have. They feel like they dodged a bullet. But I guess when I watched that game closely, and then, of course, as we all recognize, didn't see him come in for the second period. And, then I thought the broadcast did a nice job of isolating where they thought that he may have tweaked something. And that's exactly what it turned out to be, a lower body tweak. I mean, somewhere in the leg. How's that? But given the history of Anthony Stolarz, it could have been much worse, but he was able to battle through the first period and stayed in the net until the conclusion of the period. So I think initially that gave the group some hope that it wasn't going to be overly serious, but until you go through the process of the imaging and whatnot, you can't be certain. So I know the Leafs feel fortunate that he probably isn't going to miss more than a couple of games, but I think their primary focus is getting through the weekend. We know that Dennis Hildeby has been called up. Get through the weekend and then reset early in the week and see where Stolarz is at that point.
Dregs, was this a sort of a cautionary tale of the dangers of maybe veering from the back and forth, Stolarz Wall, as a tandem when you play? I know it wasn't back-to-back games, but when he tweaks something, after one day of rest and a very high workload game before it, do you think that raises any red flags in Leafland?
Well, it does in Leafland, sure, Dave, right? I mean, we all, maybe weren't surprised, but wondered why you altered the rotation. But Stolarz was so good, in his homeland there of playing well against the New Jersey Devils, a team that Toronto didn't play well against. And I didn't love the game that the Maple Leafs played. I know that there are areas that they felt like they were better in against the Anaheim Ducks, but he was so good against New Jersey that I think coaching staff felt like he earned it. And given the fact it truly wasn't a back-to-back, that he had enough time to reset, that why not ride the hot hand and give him another start? Now, I don't know how that also factors in to what they're looking at here in the games ahead and the workload that Joseph Woll was going to take over. But now we know that Joe Woll is going to have to carry the load. But I'm not one who looks back and goes, you know what, as good as he played, as much as he faced in that New Jersey game, he probably shouldn't have been given the game against the Ducks. I think he earned it, to be fair. So this is just a bit of bad luck.
We'll get a couple updates on the other injuries. Saw that Bobby McMann and David Kampf were both on the ice yesterday. We got any timelines for when those two might return?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Again, sort of typical of how the Toronto Maple Leafs have managed things. They're applying caution to all of it. McMann, I can tell you guys, is hopeful for tomorrow, and if he's not able to go on Saturday, then the expectation, of course, is that he would play on Sunday. David Kampf is looking a little bit longer, but not extended. Like, he's probably coming back at some point next week. So at some point next week, they're going to be as healthy as they've been in a long, long time.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because you look and let's hope everyone stays healthy. Sometimes injuries pop up and these questions, I guess, go to the wayside. But when that happens, there's going to be some tough decisions that the Maple Leafs might have to make when it comes to their roster, won't there be?
Yeah, there will be. And automatically, again, I'm looking at Nick Robertson, who's been on the outside looking in. And, coming out of training camp in the preseason, I think we all believe that Nick Robertson had earned a spot. Well, he's still on the roster, and he can play his way back into the mix here. And I think that's why Brad Treliving hasn't been hasty in trying to move him out. There's interest in Nick Robertson, maybe more so given what people saw in training camp and what they saw in the preseason, more so than in the summer when it was acknowledged that there just wasn't enough to move Nick Robertson. Now that he's got the one-year contract at a very affordable price, I don't think that Tree would have any trouble finding a draft pick for Nick Robertson. But they've also gone through this stretch of a variety of different injuries. And you don't want to be too quick in moving out a depth piece like Robertson, who, is hungry to find his game offensively, and he just hasn't been able to establish that. But what if another guy goes down? Now, again, you feel the comfort in having, like, Nick Robertson on standby or any of the other pieces. I think generally management is looking forward to, again, getting those guys back, getting Kampf back into the mix so you bolster what you've got in your four lines up the middle. Getting Bobby McMann back this weekend, and when you have to make that call, which inevitably Treliving is going to have to make because of roster spots, then you make that call. And if it is Nick Robertson who has to go and there's a trade that makes sense via draft pick, then Treliving will make a call at that point. But that point isn't that far away.
Dregs, how far away is it from somebody in Montreal making a call on something changing, given what we saw last night? They lose 9-2 to the Penguins. Yeah. Not exactly a juggernaut themselves. I mean, no. Canadiens, they've lost 8-2 to Seattle. They lost 7-2 to the Rangers. They lost 6-2 to the Golden Knights. They got booed off the ice last night at the Bell Center after giving up 6 in the third period. What do you make of that debacle?
Well, you nailed it, in two words. Debacle being one and third being the other. It was a 3-2 hockey game going into that final period, and the Canadiens just let it go away. And, you go to your leaders in post-game interviews, and there's Brendan Gallagher, and there's the captain, Nick Suzuki, and they were at a loss for words. Sure, you can pull out disappointment. Embarrassing is another word that was used, and that fits, no doubt about that. But, yeah, I mean, how do you fix it? And there's really no quick method of fixing what's going on with the inconsistency here in the Montreal Canadiens. I think what would be most disappointing from a coaching and a management perspective is, of late, they felt like they were turning the corner. They got Patrick Laine back. He was scoring goals, mostly on the power play, but a nice kind of injection of offense there. The problem is that the other pieces that they were counting on, like Kirby Dach as an example, and I'm not, piling on him, but he came off an extensive injury, came into this season, and they felt like with a healthy Kirby Dach that would be a real nice compliment. He could be a driver of a line, and maybe it's the extension of the injury. He has not been able to do that. So that and other areas of concern up front have really put pressure on the Montreal Canadiens. And, there's talk in that market. I do Montreal radio twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. And this morning they were talking about, okay, well, there has to be a fix that Ken Hughes, the general manager, can use. Can you move out Matheson? Can you move out Savard? Well, yeah, you can, and those are valuable pieces, but they're experienced defense. And so if you bring up Logan Mailloux from the American Hockey League, and you've got Arbor Jacki, and you've got all these young, Lane Hudson, another one. He's a dynamic player. When you watch him, there are flashes of brilliance, but you got to insulate those guys too. So I just feel like this is going to be that year of inconsistency in Montreal, and when Ken Hughes starts trading, it's likely going to be for younger players or draft picks, and that's probably closer to the deadline.
With Darren Dreger, another team that sounds like they're making phone calls, or at least taking phone calls, is Adams and the Buffalo Sabres, who are going to be in town this weekend. Do you expect for them to do, like, they've lost 8 in a row here, Dreg? Something has to change.
Yeah, and, Adams is one who continues to preach that the answer should be within. I know he told the media that a week ago, and, they're trying to administer accountability, and they do that through the experience of Lindy Ruff, of course, back on the bench of the Buffalo Sabres. And you can do that. You can bench Owen Power for, a half a period or whatever it was. You can try and, extract a pound of flesh from J.J. Peterka and go down the list here, right? At the end of the day, I think they're having a real problem identifying who the core is in Buffalo. And if you don't know who your core is, and that makes it real difficult trying to identify the pieces that you feel like you can move, right? So Jack Quinn, again, is going through an experience here of tough love under the guidance of Lindy. So teams are calling. And Kevin Adams is basically saying, yeah, I'm willing to make a move, and I'm willing to make a move today that helps me now, but not at the expense of a Jack Quinn or his younger players. And that's where it gets problematic, right? And I think of the trade that Bill Guerin just made with Columbus Blue Jackets acquiring David Jiricek. And it's a bit of a gamble on Minnesota's side. I mean, you're looking at a top draft pick. You're looking at a 21-year-old defenseman. So why isn't there any room in Columbus, but all of a sudden Guerin and company are willing to part with all the assets they did to acquire this guy from the Blue Jackets? And Guerin will say, well, we felt like he is a player that can help us, not just in now and in the future. And to make it a fair trade for both, we had to give up those assets. So to come back to Buffalo, is Kevin Adams in a position where he's willing to give up the assets needed to help this team both now and in the future? And we don't have the evidence to say he is. He says he is, but we don't know that he is. And to the point, just to wrap up Buffalo here, where he talked about how, they don't have palm trees and they don't have the tax jurisdiction that's favorable in New York. I get all that. I get it. But the problem that they have is one that impacts teams like Ottawa and Winnipeg when they were going through tough times, and that is the lure of the free agent. Or most recently, Buffalo had interest in Jake Trouba from the New York Rangers. Well, Trouba isn't going to Buffalo. So there's a lot of things that Kevin Adams is having to navigate through these days.
Dregs, I was wondering when you had the sand between your toes on the golden beaches of Florida there, talking to all the movers and shakers in the industry, what kind of buzz were you hearing about the CBA talks and future salary cap numbers? It seems like there was maybe some discussions to that end down in Florida at the Board of Governors.
Yeah, you're right, David. But, again, as you've experienced historically, a lot of this meeting is about updates. And in fact, this is one of the rare meetings where there was no vote on anything. So that's what it was. It was a business update. It was projections. It was ideas on financial growth, globally. But, specific to the salary cap, all of that is intertwined with collective bargaining agreement. And, Bettman and his deputy commissioner, Bill Daly, are confident that they're going to be able to engage in CBA negotiations, Marty Walsh from the PA, relatively soon. I know that the pie in the sky expectation is that they can get something done as early as the playoffs or perhaps the Stanley Cup final if you want to push it a little bit further. And that's good news. I mean, the salary cap is projecting to, jump up to, I guess, what are we at now? 90 or 88 million. So 94.5, something along those lines. Maybe it's 92.5. All these numbers are kind of going through my head. Anyway, there's a 5% jump that is going to be meaningful, and it'll jump after that. But could there be something more substantive in terms of that salary cap growth as part of the CBA negotiations with the NHLPA? And therein lies the uncertainty. But there's optimism that we're not going to have to spend too many eye-glazing conversations going through every detail of the collective bargaining negotiations, because it sounds like both Bettman and Marty Walsh are aligned that, the labor piece is a good thing and revenue growth is a good thing for both sides. So we'll see if both stay true to their word or someone throws an anvil overboard and see what happens after that.
All right, Dregs, we'll leave it there. Appreciate the insight as always, pal. We'll chat again soon.
Okay, guys. Have a great weekend.
You as well. Darren Dreger, TSN Hockey Insider. And, the cap going up is obviously great for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
I mean, every team realistically loves to see the cap going up. But I was looking, I think the Leafs, they've got like $69 million committed next year. So they'll have, $30-ish million, I think, next season that they can go out and acquire some new talent.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money. Now they got a couple of big contracts, obviously. Mitch Marner, Tavares. How much did those guys get? Nyes is an RFA. He's got to get paid too. And, he just continues to produce and put up some points. So I think he's gonna get paid a little bit. But there's a good chance if that gets escalated up into the $92 million range. I mean, the Leafs could continue to add to this group that they've built over the last couple of years with Treliving.
It tends to go faster, right? $5 million or $4+ million, it's not as much as it used to be, right? And these guys are not going to be coming cheap. None of those guys you mentioned are going to be coming at minimum salaries and hometown discount deals.
No, probably not. Probably not.
Unless something changes.
Tavares is the interesting one, though.
Yeah.
Like, that one's like hometown guy. Now, they stripped the C. And it doesn't appear like that's really impacted. He's had a really good season. I don't think we're talking enough about the year that he's had. He's like point per game. Mm-hmm. And you remember back when he first signed that mega monster deal back in the day, 7 years, $11 million. There was a lot of chatter about, well, year 6 and 7 is not going to look great, but the first 5 years, man, that's going to be terrific.
Right.
He's playing at the same pace he's been the last few years this season with the Leafs. He's averaging a point per game. And last night, I thought that line of him, Pacioretty, and Nylander, I thought that was the best line for the Maple Leafs at times.
Really good.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, Pacioretty was outstanding.
He was terrific last night. A couple of goals and set up the Nylander goal. Really nice goal by Nylander, too. Nice little hand-eye.
Not many guys can do that.
Not many guys can do that. Berube was asked about that. He kind of chuckled, and he's like, not me.
No, not
me.
Definitely not him, and not 99.9% of the people that have ever picked up a hockey stick. So.
No, definitely not. Johnny might be able to do something like that. Yeah,
wow.
What a goal.
Yeah,
nice
Johnny's got hands like that.
He's got hands like that. I'll ask him if he's ever had a nice little nice goal where he batted it, a little hand-eye situation
Guaranteed
going on.
He has.
Yeah, he'll join us at the top of the hour. Luke Wilson still to come. We got our football picks. Big weekend. Bills-Lions. It's going to be a hell of a game. That's the one that Hazenbro is on the clock for, too. I had to message Hazy B and see where he's at with that pick.
Super Bowl preview?
Yeah, it could be. It very well could be. Javon Shepard going to join also at 6:30. Overdrive continues up on TSN 4 and on TSN 1050. Welcome back into Overdrive. Mike DiStefano filling in for my partsy, Hazy B. Got Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star alongside me. Overdrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. I would imagine the Blue Jays' odds to win the AL East continue to tumble as we see other teams in the division start to absolutely load up. And, we've seen a couple of moves now that should be daunting. And today the Yankees continue to add. They added Max Fried the other day, and they continue to add to the pitching, picking up one of the best closers and relief pitchers in baseball over the last 3 to 5 years, Devin Williams. Coming to the Yanks, and they gave up a good package of prospects for him, but that's a big-time addition. Like last year, the one thing that plagued the Yankees was pitching, right? Pitching and bullpen, and that's been a big issue for them. Well, they went out and they got themselves a great starter in Max Fried, and now an elite reliever and closer in Devin Williams.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to put up offense against this club. Well,
our TSN baseball insider Steve Phillips put it really well when the whole Mets-Soto saga came to an end and Juan Soto left the Yankees for the crosstown team. I won't call them rivals because they've never really been rivals of the Yankees in Queens, New York, the Mets. Phillips said, this is bad for people who play against the Yankees. This is bad for the Blue Jays and the rest of the AL East, because not only do the Yankees have money to spend, because they were willing to spend $700 plus on Soto themselves, but they're motivated to spend it. They're motivated for revenge. And here they go. They get not only the starter with the lowest qualified ERA since 2022 in the major leagues, they get the reliever with the lowest qualified ERA in the major leagues since 2022. That's pretty good 1-2 punch.
Pretty good business. They took that money and they put it elsewhere, and they were very prompt to pivot to their other options. The Blue Jays have not been able to do that. It's 2 straight off seasons where they really have not been able to pivot and make an addition. Apparently, they're in on Corbin Burns. A pretty good starter. He brings some good pitching to the Blue Jays. But like, what Jerry's percentage would you put that Corbin Burns is a Blue Jay come springtime?
Well, you're losing faith that the Blue Jays can pull off anything of substance, right?
Apparently he wants a commitment to Vladdy before he even makes a deal with the team.
That would make sense.
That would make sense.
You want to know where you stand. You want to know where this team is heading before you head there.
Absolutely. Second hour of OverDrive coming up next.